My 8-year-old son found my mother's tablet on the couch. He pressed record by accident during a call. 3 days later at family dinner, he played the recording for everyone. My mother said on it, "Don't give him anything. He'll just waste it like the business." I didn't react. I took the tablet, smiled, and said, "There's more. Listen to what I told my lawyer." The whole room gasped. I was standing at the head of the table. My mother's face had gone from confused to pale in about 4 seconds. My sister had her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. My father was looking at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't, not really. My son was still holding his juice box, completely unaware that he'd just detonated 15 years of silence. I pressed play. My voice came through the tablet speaker, clear and steady. "Patricia, I need you to file the petition Monday morning. All of it. The trust dissolution, the estate challenge, and the business records. I want everything on the table before the holidays." There was a pause. Then Patricia Reyes, my attorney, said, "Are you absolutely sure? Once we do this, there's no going back." My voice again. "I've been sure for 3 years. I was just waiting for the right moment." I set the tablet down gently next to the mashed potatoes. The room was so quiet I could hear my nephew breathing across the table. My mother opened her mouth. I raised one hand. "Let me tell you how we got here. I grew up in a family that believed in appearances. My father built a commercial real estate business from nothing. By the time I was 10, we had the big house, the country club membership, the vacations that came with photo albums thick enough to require their own shelf. My mother never worked outside the home, but she worked the social networks like a general. Charity galas, board positions. The kind of connections that made things happen quietly. My older sister Emma fit perfectly. She married a cardiologist when she was 26. She had 3 children by 30. She hosted dinner parties where people talked about wine regions and private schools. My mother adored her, not in a quiet way. In a "this is what success looks like" way that she made sure everyone heard. I was different. I liked numbers. I liked systems. I liked figuring out how things worked and then making them work better. When I told my parents I wanted to study finance, my mother said, "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You'll meet so many successful men." When I said I wanted to work in investment management, she patted my hand and said, "Well, until you settle down, that's fine." I met David when I was 27. He worked in software sales. He was funny and kind and completely unimpressed by my family's money. We got married in a small ceremony that my mother spent 6 months apologizing for to her friends. 2 years later, we had our son. My mother showed up at the hospital with a photo album she'd already started. "Finally," she said, "now you can focus on what matters." What mattered to me was the portfolio I'd been building since I was 23. What mattered was the consulting work I did from home while my son napped. What mattered was the investment strategy I'd developed that was quietly outperforming every benchmark I tracked it against. But I didn't talk about it at family dinners. I listened to my sister describe her kitchen renovation. I smiled when my mother talked about the importance of being present for your children. I let them think I'd given it all up. When my father had his first heart attack, I was 32. He survived, but it scared him. He started talking about succession planning. He called a family meeting. Emma and her husband sat on one side of the conference table at his office. David and I sat on the other. My father's attorney was there. His accountant was there. My father cleared his throat and said, "I want to make sure the business stays in the family." Emma's husband spoke first. "We've actually been thinking about this. I'd be happy to step into a leadership role. My schedule is flexible enough now." My father nodded. He looked at me. "And you, sweetheart, I know you have your hands full at home." I said, "I think Emma's family would be wonderful stewards." My mother squeezed my hand under the table. Grateful, I think, that I wasn't going to make things complicated. The business was worth about $4 million at that point. The succession plan gave Emma's husband operational control. David and I got a minority stake, 20% non-voting. The attorney slid the papers across the table. I signed them. Emma's husband signed them. My father signed them. My mother watched the whole thing with this peaceful smile, like everything was finally in order. I called Patricia Reyes the next day. I'd met her 2 years earlier at a professional development seminar. She specialized in family wealth litigation and estate planning. I told her what had happened. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Do you have your own assets?" I said, "Yes." She said, "How much?" I said, "Somewhere around 2 million." There was a pause. She said, "I'm sorry you built that while staying home with a toddler." I said, "I didn't stay home. I worked from home. People assume it's the same thing." The pattern continued. Family dinners every Sunday. Holidays at my parents' house. Emma's family always arrived in their new cars. My mother would comment on them. "Isn't it wonderful when hard work pays off?" she'd say, looking at Emma. Then she'd turn to me. "How's your little one? Is he sleeping through the night yet?" I'd smile. I'd say, "He's wonderful." I wouldn't mention that I'd closed a consulting contract worth $80,000 the week before. I wouldn't mention that my portfolio had just crossed $3 million. My father had a second heart attack when I was 34. This one was worse. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks. When he came home, he was different. Frailer, more worried. He started talking about the business constantly. Emma's husband had been running it for 2 years. The revenue was flat. My father couldn't understand why. He'd built something that grew 15% year over year for 2 decades. Now it was stagnant. I went to visit him one afternoon. My mother was at her book club. He was sitting in his study looking at spreadsheets. He saw me and smiled. "There's my sweet girl," he said. "How's my grandson?" I said. "He's good, learning to read." I sat down across from him. I looked at the spreadsheets. I could see the problems immediately. Operational inefficiencies, poor contract negotiation, a complete failure to adapt to market changes. I almost said something. Then my father said, "I'm so glad you married David. He's solid. Dependable, not like these finance types who only care about numbers." I drove home. I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes. David came out. He knocked on the window. "You okay?" I said. "They have no idea." He said, "I know." He said, "Do you want them to?" I said, "I don't know yet." When my son was 6, my father died. The funeral was enormous. Business associates, old friends, people from the country club. My mother stood at the front in her black dress and accepted condolences like a queen. Emma cried beautifully. Her husband gave a eulogy about legacy and family values. I sat in the 3rd row and held my son's hand and thought about the spreadsheets I'd seen in my father's study. The will reading was 2 weeks later. Same conference room, same attorney. My mother sat at the head of the table. Emma and her husband on one side, David and me on the other. The attorney read through the bequests, the house to my mother. Various accounts and investments split between Emma and me, 60-40. Then the business. To my daughter Emma and her husband, who have shown the dedication and business acumen to carry forward what I built. My mother reached across and squeezed Emma's hand. Emma was crying again. Her husband looked appropriately solemn. The attorney slid more papers across the table. My mother signed. Emma signed. Her husband signed. I was not asked to sign anything. I was not mentioned in relation to the business at all. The 20% minority stake I'd been given 4 years earlier had been dissolved and redistributed. I'd signed something at some point, apparently, that allowed for that. I waited until everyone was standing up. Then I said, "Can I get copies of everything?" The attorney looked at my mother. My mother said, "Of course, sweetheart, though I'm not sure why you'd need them. This is all fairly straightforward." I said, "Just for my records." I took the folder. I went home. I spread everything out on my dining room table. I looked at it for 3 hours. Then I called Patricia. She came to my house the next morning. She looked at every document. She made notes. She asked questions. Finally, she sat back and said, "They restructured your stake without proper notification. That's the first problem. The second problem is the valuation. They're claiming the business is worth $3.2 million. Based on the contracts I'm seeing here, it should be valued at minimum $4.8 million. Someone is either incompetent or lying." I said, "What are my options?" She said, "You can challenge the estate distribution. You can force a proper valuation. You can demand transparency on the business operations since your father's death." She paused. "But you should know, this will not be quiet. Your family will know exactly what you're doing." I thought about my mother at the funeral. I thought about Emma's husband giving that eulogy. I thought about every Sunday dinner where I'd smiled and nodded while they talked about things that mattered and looked at me like I was too simple to understand. I said, "How long would it take to build the case?" Patricia said, 6 months to a year if we're thorough." I said, "Then let's be thorough." I didn't change anything visible. I still showed up at Sunday dinners. I still brought my son. I still listened to my mother talk about Emma's children and their private school applications. But every week, I was building something they couldn't see. Patricia requested documents through formal legal channels. My mother called me confused. "Why do you need these? The estate is settled." I said, "Just making sure I understand everything. You always said it's important to be organized." She seemed satisfied with that. Emma's husband fought the document requests. That told me something. Patricia kept pushing. We got them eventually. She was right. The business had been undervalued by over $1 million, but that wasn't all. Emma's husband had restructured debt in ways that benefited him personally. He'd awarded himself consulting contracts that my father never approved. He'd been systematically moving value out of the business and into side entities he controlled. I was sitting in Patricia's office when she showed me the full analysis. She said, "This is fraud, not aggressive accounting. Actual fraud." I said, "Can we prove it?" She said, "I already have. The question is what you want to do with it." I looked at the documents spread across her conference table. Numbers I understood better than anyone in my family ever had. Evidence of exactly what they'd thought I was too soft to notice. I didn't go to Sunday dinner the next week. My mother called. "Are you feeling all right?" I said, "Just tired. I'll see you soon." She said, "Emma mentioned you've been requesting a lot of financial documents. Is everything okay?" I said, "Everything is fine. I'm just trying to understand Dad's legacy." She said, "Well, don't worry yourself too much. Emma's husband has it all under control. If you have ever been counted out by someone who should have known better, you already know what that silence feels like." I spent 3 years building the case. 3 years of Sunday dinners where my mother asked if I'd thought about going back to work, maybe part-time, something that wouldn't interfere with family time. 3 years of Emma talking about her husband's brilliant business strategies. 3 years of my son getting older, more observant, starting to understand that his grandmother had different tones for different people. My mother started talking about updating her own estate plan. She invited me to lunch, just the two of us. She ordered a salad and talked about the importance of family unity. "Your father would have wanted us all to stay close," she said. "Which is why I'm planning to structure things so that Emma's family continues to oversee the business assets. They have the expertise, you understand." I said, "I understand." She looked relieved. She reached across and patted my hand. "I knew you would. You've always been my sensible girl." I signed documents that afternoon. Papers my mother's attorney had prepared. I read every word. I knew exactly what I was signing. Acknowledgement that I understood the business would remain under Emma's husband's control. Acknowledgement that I had no claims to operational authority. Patricia had advised me to sign them. "Let them think you've accepted it," she said. "Let them relax." They relaxed. Emma's husband stopped fighting the document requests. My mother stopped asking pointed questions about why I needed financial records. They thought I'd given up. They thought I'd finally understood my place. What they didn't know was that I'd just finished transferring my assets into a family trust with my son as the beneficiary and myself as the trustee. What they didn't know was that my consulting business had grown to the point where I was managing portfolios worth over $15 million. What they didn't know was that Patricia had filed preliminary paperwork that wouldn't become visible until I decided to move forward. My son turned 8 in November. We had a small party. My mother came. Emma came with her family. My mother brought an expensive gift, a savings bond. "For his future," she said. "Since you and David are doing your best, but we want to make sure he has opportunities." I thanked her. I watched my son open the card. $500, my mother beamed. "When he's older, this will mean something," she said. I had set up a trust fund for my son when he was 6 months old. It was currently worth $630,000, but I didn't mention that. I just said, "That's very generous." My mother looked satisfied. She looked at me the way she'd looked at me my entire life. Kind, slightly pitying. Certain that she understood exactly who I was and what I was capable of. The recording happened by accident. My son had been playing with my mother's tablet at Thanksgiving. He was taking pictures, recording videos of the dog, the kind of thing 8-year-olds do. My mother had left it on the couch. She'd gone into the kitchen with Emma. They were talking about the estate plan. My mother was on the phone with her attorney. My son's tablet was still recording. I didn't know about it until 3 days later. My son was showing me his videos. "Look, Grandma's dog can chase his tail for so long." Then another video started playing, my mother's voice. Clear. "I want to make sure the business assets are completely protected. Emma's husband has built on what my husband started. He deserves to see that through without interference." The attorney's voice. "And your other daughter," my mother, "she's not equipped for this. She never has been. Don't give him anything beyond what's required. He'll just waste it like the business would have been wasted if we'd let her anywhere near it." I watched my son's face. He didn't understand what he was hearing, but I did. I downloaded the video to my laptop. I sent it to Patricia. She called me back in 10 minutes. "This changes everything," she said. "This is consciousness of guilt. This is intent to defraud." This is evidence that they knowingly undervalued assets to minimize your inheritance. I said, I want to use it. She said, are you ready for what happens next? I said, I've been ready for 3 years. I invited everyone to dinner, my house, Sunday evening. My mother was surprised. You never host, she said. I said, I thought it was time. She agreed immediately. She probably thought I was finally stepping into a proper domestic role. Emma said she'd bring wine. Her husband said he'd come straight from the office. They arrived at 6. My mother kissed my son on the head. There's my brilliant boy, she said. Emma complimented my table settings. Her husband talked about a contract he'd just closed. We sat down. I served pot roast. My mother said, this is lovely. Isn't this lovely? Everyone agreed. We were halfway through the meal when my son said, Grandma, I found something on your tablet. Everything I had built was about to be tested in front of 43 people who had absolutely no idea it existed. I built my consulting business while my son learned to walk. The first client came through a referral from a woman I'd met at a professional development seminar. She needed portfolio restructuring. I charged her $12,000. She paid it. She referred 2 more clients. By the time my son was 2, I was managing investment strategies for 6 families. By the time he was 4, I had 17 clients and had brought in just over $400,000 in fees. I kept it quiet because I needed to see what they would do. I needed to know if my family would recognize competence when they saw it or if they would find ways to diminish it regardless. The answer came at my father's first estate meeting. They gave away the business and thanked me for not making it complicated. That was when I knew. Patricia became more than my attorney. She became the architect of everything I was building toward. She had worked on 3 major family estate disputes. She understood the psychology of families who mistake kindness for weakness. When I showed her the recording my son had accidentally captured, she listened to it twice. Then she leaned back in her chair. Your mother just gave us intent. She knows what she's doing is wrong. She's doing it anyway. We needed more than the recording. We needed documentation that showed the systematic undervaluation of the business. We needed proof that Emma's husband had been siphoning value. We needed a timeline that demonstrated this wasn't an accident but a pattern. Patricia brought in Marcus Webb, a forensic accountant who specialized in family business fraud. He was expensive. I paid him $65,000 over 8 months. He found everything. The first close call came 11 months before the dinner. My mother invited me to lunch at the club. She was in a good mood. Emma had just announced her youngest daughter had been accepted to a prestigious prep school. My mother ordered champagne. To family success, she said. We touched glasses, then she tilted her head. You know, I ran into Jennifer Morrison last week. She mentioned you did some consulting work for her sister a few years ago. I told her she must be confused. I took a sip of champagne. Not confused. I did work for Catherine Morrison. Portfolio optimization. My mother's smile tightened just slightly. You never mentioned that. You never asked what I did during the day. Well, that's wonderful, sweetheart. A little project here and there, very enterprising. She patted my hand. Though I hope it doesn't take too much time away from being present for your son. I could have told her then. I could have explained that my little projects had generated over $900,000 in the past 4 years. Instead, I smiled. I manage my time carefully. She looked relieved. The rest of lunch was pleasant. She talked about Emma's husband receiving an award from the Business Association. When I got home, I called Patricia. I need the valuation analysis finalized. She's getting curious. Patricia had it done in 3 weeks. The business Emma's husband claimed was worth $3.2 million was actually worth $5.1 million. He'd been systematically underreporting revenue and inflating expenses to suppress the valuation. Marcus had the documentation to prove it. The second close call was worse. Emma invited me to coffee 6 months before the dinner, just the 2 of us. She picked a cafe near her house, expensive neighborhood. She was wearing new jewelry. She hugged me when I arrived. I feel like I never see you anymore, she said. We ordered. She asked about my son. I asked about her children. Then she leaned forward. Mom mentioned you've been requesting financial documents, a lot of them. Just trying to understand Dad's legacy. That's sweet. She stirred her latte. But you know, it's making things complicated for my husband. All these formal requests through attorneys. If you have questions, you can just ask us. I didn't realize my questions were causing problems. They're not, it's just you know how these things are. Legal processes create paper trails. Paper trails raise questions with banks and investors. It makes everyone look less stable. She reached across and touched my hand. We're family. We should handle things as family. I looked at my sister. She meant it. She genuinely believed that asking questions was the problem, not what the answers might reveal. I pulled my hand back gently. I'll keep that in mind, she smiled. Good, because honestly, some of the things you're asking about are pretty complex. I barely understand half of it myself, and I'm married to someone who does this for a living. I just don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I drove home. I sat in my car in the driveway for 15 minutes. Then I texted Patricia. Accelerate timeline, they're trying to shut it down. She responded immediately. Already filed motion to compel full disclosure. They can't stop it now. The third close call happened at Thanksgiving. 2 weeks before the dinner I was planning, my mother's house was full. Emma's family, my mother's sister and her husband. 21 people total. We were in the living room after dinner. My mother was holding court, telling a story about my father's first big deal. Emma's husband was nodding along. My mother's voice carried. He always knew how to spot an opportunity. He built something real, something lasting, and now it's in good hands. She looked at Emma's husband. We're so grateful you've carried it forward. My son was sitting next to me. He was 7 then, almost 8, old enough to understand some things. He looked up at me. Mom, didn't Grandpa build that for you too? The room didn't go completely quiet, but several people turned. My mother heard. She smiled at my son. Your grandfather built it for the whole family, sweetheart, but some people are better suited to run businesses than others. Your mom is wonderful at what she does. Being a mother is the most important job there is. I felt my son stiffen next to me. He was about to say something. I put my hand on his shoulder, gentle. I looked at my mother. You're absolutely right. Being present is what matters. I looked at my son. Want to help me get dessert ready? We went to the kitchen. He was quiet. I started arranging pie slices. He watched me for a minute, then he asked, do you like being a mom more than other work? I love being your mom. That's not what I asked. I stopped cutting pie. I looked at my son, 8 years old and already learning to hear what people didn't say. I love being your mom. I also love the other work I do. People who love you should want you to have both. He thought about that. Then he nodded. Okay. We brought out dessert. I smiled at my mother. I served pie to everyone. Patricia had texted me that afternoon. Everything is filed. We have court dates scheduled. The motion to compel will be heard December 8th. You need to decide when you want to move. I had already decided. I just needed the right moment. That moment came 3 days later when my son found the recording. I had everything prepared. Patricia had the full case documentation ready. Marcus had his forensic analysis ready. I had statements from 3 independent business valuators. I had my own financial disclosures showing exactly what I'd built, while my family assumed I was incapable. I had the recording that proved my mother knew exactly what she was doing. All of it was organized in a folder in my dining room cabinet. All of it was waiting for the dinner I'd invited them to. The week before the dinner, my mother called to ask what she could bring. Just yourself, I told her. She sounded pleased. It's so nice when you host. You should do this more often. Emma texted to ask if she could bring wine. I said yes. Her husband asked if 6 o'clock was firm because he had a late meeting. I told him we'd wait. Patricia came to my house 2 days before the dinner. She sat at my kitchen table and went through everything one more time. Once you play that recording, this becomes public. Your family will know. Their business associates will know. There will be questions. There might be press. She looked at me. Are you ready for that? I thought about every Sunday dinner, every condescending comment, every assumption that I was too soft, too distracted, too simple to understand what they were doing. I thought about my son asking if I liked being his mom more than other work. I thought about the future I was building for him, one where he wouldn't grow up learning that kindness meant accepting disrespect. I'm ready, she nodded. Then let's finish this. The morning of the dinner, I woke up calm. I made breakfast for my son. I helped him with his homework. I confirmed the reservation I'd made at the lawyer's office for the following morning. Patricia had scheduled a formal mediation. My family didn't know about it yet. They would after tonight. David came home early from work. He found me in the kitchen preparing pot roast. He leaned against the counter. You nervous? No. Should I be nervous? Probably. He laughed. Then he stopped laughing. Are you sure about this? I turned to look at him. They spent 15 years making sure I knew my place. Tonight they find out where my place actually is. They started arriving at 5:45. My mother first, carrying flowers. Emma and her family 10 minutes later. Emma's husband came last, apologizing for being late, talking on his phone until Emma touched his arm. My son was excited. He loved when the family came over. He didn't understand yet what was about to happen. We sat down to eat pot roast. mashed potatoes, green beans. My mother complimented everything. Emma talked about her daughter's school. Her husband mentioned a potential expansion of the business. My mother beamed. Your father would be so proud of what you've built on his foundation. I let them talk. I served seconds. I poured more wine. I watched the clock. At 6:37, my son finished his dinner. He looked at me. I nodded. He got up and went to the living room. He came back carrying my mother's tablet. Grandma, I found something on your tablet. My mother looked up, smiling. What did you find, sweetheart? He pressed play. The video started. My mother's voice filled the dining room. Clear, unmistakable. The attorney's question, her answer. Don't give him anything beyond what's required. He'll just waste it like the business would have been wasted if we'd let her anywhere near it. Emma's fork clattered against her plate. My mother's face shifted through several expressions in about 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, something that might have been fear. Her husband stopped mid-reach for his wine glass. David was watching me. My son was looking at the tablet, proud of himself for finding something interesting. I let the recording play all the way through. When it ended, I took the tablet from my son. I set it down next to the mashed potatoes. The room was breathing, but no one was speaking. I could hear my nephew shifting in his chair. I could hear Emma's daughter whisper something to her brother. My mother found her voice first. It came out smaller than usual. Where did you get that? From your tablet. You left it on the couch at Thanksgiving. That was a private conversation. About my inheritance, that made it my business. Emma leaned forward. Her voice had an edge I'd never heard directed at me before. This is ridiculous. You recorded Mom without her knowledge. I didn't record anything. Your nephew did, by accident. I looked at my son. Why don't you go upstairs for a bit, sweetheart? I'll call you when it's time for dessert. He left. He was confused but obedient. The moment he was gone, my mother's face hardened. Even if that conversation happened, it was taken out of context. I was simply being realistic about your capabilities. My capabilities. Yes. She folded her hands on the table. Sweetheart, you're a wonderful mother. But business. That's simply not your strength? I smiled. It felt good. Let me tell you about my strengths. I want to know if you would have said what I said next, because I still think about it. I stood up. I walked to the dining room cabinet. I pulled out a folder. It was thick, professional. The kind of folder that holds documents prepared by people who get paid to make sure every word is defensible. I set it on the table in front of my mother. She looked at it like I'd placed a live snake there. For the past 4 years, I've run a consulting business specializing in investment portfolio optimization and wealth management. I currently manage strategies for 23 families. Last year alone, my business generated $1.4 million in revenue. Emma's husband made a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a scoff. That's not possible. It's documented, every contract, every payment, every tax filing. I opened the folder. I pulled out the first set of pages. Here's my business registration. Here's my client list with names redacted for privacy. Here's my tax return from last year showing exactly what I earned. I slid the papers across the table to my mother. She didn't touch them. Emma leaned over to look. Her face shifted. She picked up the tax return. She scanned it. She looked at me like she'd never seen me before. My mother's voice came out controlled. Even if this is true, what does it have to do with your father's estate? Everything. I pulled out the second set of documents. This is the business valuation your attorney provided during the estate settlement. It valued Dad's company at $3.2 million. I pulled out another set. This is an independent valuation I commissioned from Marcus Webb, a forensic accountant who specializes in family business disputes. His analysis valued the business at $5.1 million. Emma's husband pushed back from the table. His chair scraped against the floor. That's absurd. Our accountant would have caught a discrepancy like that. Your accountant is the one who created it. The room temperature seemed to drop. My mother's sister, who had been quiet in the corner, leaned forward slightly. Emma was staring at her husband. He was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen from him before. Something between outrage and calculation. I pulled out the third document. This is Marcus's full forensic analysis. Would you like me to walk everyone through it? The debt restructuring that benefited you personally, the consulting contracts you awarded yourself without board approval, the side entities you created to move assets off the company books. That's privileged business information. His voice had teeth now. You had no right to access any of that. I had every right. I'm a partial heir to the estate. Patricia Reyes, my attorney, filed formal discovery requests. You fought them for 8 months. A judge ordered you to comply. Everything in this folder came through legal channels. My mother found her voice. It came out sharp. You hired an attorney against your own family? I hired an attorney to protect my interests. The same way Emma hired one, the same way you hired one. That's different. We were settling an estate. You were starting a war. No, I looked at her directly. You started it when you restructured my stake without notification. You continued it when you undervalued the business. You finished it when you told your attorney not to give me anything because I'd just waste it. Emma's voice cracked into the space between us. Mom, what is she talking about? My mother's face hardened. I was protecting the family assets. From me? I let that sit for a moment. Your own daughter. From someone who had no experience, no track record. No proof they could handle that kind of responsibility. She gestured at the folder. You show me some papers and expect me to believe you built a business while staying home with a child? That's not how the world works. I pulled out another document. My hands were steady. This is a statement from First National Bank showing the current balance of the trust fund I established for my son when he was 6 months old. It's currently worth $630,000. I funded it entirely from my consulting income. Emma picked up that paper too. She read it. She set it down very carefully. Her voice came out quiet. $630,000. Yes, you saved that much while we thought you were struggling. You never asked if I was struggling. You assumed. My mother's sister spoke for the first time. Her voice was cautious. Margaret, did you know about any of this? My mother didn't answer. She was looking at the papers spread across the table like they were written in a language she didn't speak. Emma's husband had his phone out. He was typing something. Patricia had warned me he'd probably contact his own attorney the moment he understood what was happening. I pulled out the final document. This is a petition I filed 6 days ago. It requests a full forensic audit of the business, a revaluation of the estate, and a redistribution of assets based on the corrected valuation. It also requests an investigation into the financial management since my father's death. Emma's husband stopped typing. You can't do that. I already did. The court accepted the petition. We have a hearing scheduled for December 8th. You'll lose. But his voice had lost its certainty. No judge is going to overturn a settled estate based on your accusations. They're not accusations, they're facts, documented facts, and the recording proves intent. I looked at my mother. You knew what you were doing was wrong. You did it anyway. You told your attorney to minimize my inheritance because you believed I wasn't capable of managing it, while I was building something worth over $3 million. The number landed like a physical weight. Emma actually flinched. My mother's sister put her hand over her mouth. David, who had been silent through all of this, reached under the table and squeezed my hand once. My mother's face had gone through several transformations. Now it settled into something cold and brittle. You're going to destroy this family over money. I'm going to get what I'm owed. There's a difference. Your father would be ashamed. My father gave away my inheritance to a man who's been stealing from the company for 5 years. I think his judgment might not be the standard we should use. Emma made a small sound. She was looking at her husband. He wouldn't meet her eyes. That told her something. I watched her face change as she understood. My mother stood up. Her chair didn't scrape. She was too controlled for that, but her hands were gripping the table edge. You planned this, the dinner, the recording, all of it. Yes, you manipulated your own son. I asked him to show everyone something he found. He has no idea what it means. He thinks he discovered a fun secret. I stood up too. We were facing each other across the table. But yes, I planned this. I've been planning it for 4 years, every Sunday dinner, every condescending comment. Every assumption that I was too simple to understand what you were doing, I was documenting it. That's vindictive. That's strategic. I picked up the folder. You taught me that appearances matter, that patience is a virtue, that the best revenge is success. I smiled at her. I learned those lessons very well. My mother's sister stood up. She looked at my mother. Margaret, I think we should go? No, my mother's voice was steel. I'm not leaving until this is resolved. It's not going to be resolved tonight. Patricia had told me to say that if things escalated, keep it formal, keep it contained. I filed the petition. You'll receive formal notice. You can respond through your attorneys, but nothing that happens in this dining room changes what happens in court. Emma's husband finally looked up from his phone. You realize this will cost you everything? Your relationship with your family, your son's relationship with his grandmother, all of it. What it will cost me is Sunday dinners where I pretend not to notice I'm being robbed. If you're still here, hit like. I need to know you saw that. Emma was crying, not dramatically, just tears running down her face while she stared at the papers on the table. I didn't know, she whispered. About the business, the valuation, I didn't know. I looked at my sister. I wanted to believe her. Part of me did. She'd always been the golden child, but she'd never been cruel, just oblivious. Comfortable. You didn't ask. Neither did you. I was busy building something while you all assumed I was incapable. My mother's voice cut through. Stop performing. You're not a victim here. You're angry because your father recognized that Emma's husband had the skills to run a business and you didn't. Emma's husband has been committing fraud. That's an allegation. It's a fact. Marcus Webb documented systematic asset transfers, inflated expense reports, and unauthorized compensation structures. Evidence is in the folder. Emma's husband stood up. His face had shifted again. Now it was pure calculation. You know what this looks like: a daughter who's bitter about her inheritance, hiring people to create a narrative that justifies her greed. The recording isn't a narrative. It's your mother-in-law admitting she deliberately minimized my share. Taken out of context. There is no context where "don't give him anything, he'll just waste it" means something different. He moved around the table. Not threatening, just repositioning, trying to regain physical authority in the space. You want to know what I think? I think you've been planning this from the beginning. I think you saw an opportunity when your father got sick. You stayed quiet. You played the dutiful daughter. And the whole time you were setting this up. You're describing yourself. He stopped moving. Excuse me? You married into this family when the business was worth $2 million. You maneuvered yourself into operational control. You spent 5 years extracting value while suppressing the visible worth. And when my father died, you made sure the valuation was low enough that my inheritance would be minimized. I walked around the table toward him. Not aggressive, just closing the distance. You saw an opportunity. You took it. The only thing you didn't account for was the possibility that I was smarter than you assumed. The room had a quality of held breath. My mother's sister was watching like this was a play she hadn't bought tickets for. David was still at the table, silent, present. Emma was looking between her husband and me like she was trying to solve an equation with variables she'd never been taught. My mother's voice came from behind me. Even if everything you're saying is true, what do you want? Money? We can settle this privately. You don't need to drag us through court. I turned to face her. I don't want a settlement. I want the truth on record. I want a judge to say what happened here. I want it documented that you systematically undervalued your own daughter because you couldn't imagine she was capable. You want humiliation. I want accountability. She moved closer. Her voice dropped to something almost pleading. I'm your mother. Doesn't that mean anything? It means everything. That's why this hurts. I felt my throat tighten, but I kept my voice level. You were supposed to see me. You were supposed to know what I could do. Instead, you spent 15 years making sure I knew you didn't believe in me. I was protecting you. From what? From failure, from humiliation, from trying to be something you weren't equipped to be and falling apart when it didn't work. I built a $3 million business. I think I was equipped. You hid it. That's not the same as building something real. I hid it because I needed to see what you would do when you thought I was helpless, and you tried to cut me out. My mother's face crumpled slightly, not crying, but something breaking behind the facade. I was trying to preserve what your father built, by giving it to someone who's been stealing from it. I didn't know about that. You didn't want to know. It was easier to believe Emma's husband was competent than to consider that I might be. Emma's voice cut through, raw and angry. Stop making this about you versus me. I never asked for any of this. I turned to her. You accepted it. You sat through that estate meeting and watched them give away my inheritance and you said nothing. Because I thought it was fair. I thought they knew what they were doing. They did. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew I had a 20% stake. They restructured it without telling me. They undervalued the business to reduce what I was owed. They gave operational control to your husband and cut me out completely. At what point in that process did you think to ask if I was okay with it? She had no answer. The silence stretched. Then her husband spoke. His voice had changed again. Now it was conciliatory, reasonable. Look, clearly there have been misunderstandings. Mistakes maybe, but we're family. We can work this out. You don't need to destroy everything over financial disagreements. This isn't a disagreement, this is fraud. That's a serious accusation. It's a legal term for what Marcus documented. Marcus is someone you paid to find problems. Marcus is a forensic accountant who found systematic irregularities in your management, the kind of irregularities that will look very bad when a judge reviews them. He stared at me. I watched him recalculate. Then his face shifted into something uglier. You know what your problem is? You've always thought you were smarter than everyone else. Your father saw it. Your mother saw it. That arrogance. That need to prove you're special. I don't need to prove anything. I have documentation. You have papers someone helped you prepare, you have accusations, but at the end of the day, you're asking a court to believe that your family conspired against you, that your mother, who raised you, who loved you, deliberately tried to cheat you. Do you know how that sounds? It sounds true, he laughed, actually laughed. No court is going to side with you. You know why? Because you look like someone who's bitter, who's jealous of her sister, who can't accept that some people are better suited for certain roles. You can show them all the papers you want. They'll see what we see, someone who can't let go of not being the favorite. I let him finish. Then I pulled out one more document. I'd been saving it. This is a communication between you and Richard Castellano dated March 15th, 2022. Do you remember Richard? His face changed. Who? Richard Castellano, your college roommate. The one you brought in as a consultant to the business 18 months after you took over. We needed outside expertise. You paid him $180,000 over 2 years for consulting work that doesn't appear in any company documentation. Marcus found the payments. He also found that Richard's consulting company doesn't actually exist. It's a shell entity you created to move money off the books. Emma stood up so fast her chair tipped backward. She was looking at her husband. What is she talking about? He didn't answer. He was staring at the document in my hand. I set it on the table. Marcus found 4 separate instances of payments to entities that don't provide actual services. The total comes to just over $700,000. All of it moved out of the business, all of it during your management. My mother picked up the document. She read it. Her hands started to shake. Not a lot. Just enough that the paper trembled. She looked at Emma's husband. Is this true? It's out of context. Those payments were legitimate business expenses. To a company that doesn't exist. Consulting structures are complicated. Sometimes you work through intermediaries. I pulled out another page. This is Richard's LinkedIn profile. He's a software engineer in Seattle. He's never worked in commercial real estate consulting. He told Marcus he has no idea why his name is on these invoices. The room felt like it was tilting. Emma was backing away from her husband. My mother's sister had her hand over her mouth. David was watching everything with the careful attention of someone recording details for later. Emma's voice came out broken. You told me everything was fine. You said the business was stable. You said we were building security for our kids. Her husband turned to her. His face was desperate now. That's exactly what I was doing. Your father's company was stagnant. I took risks. I made moves. Sometimes that requires creative financial structures. You stole from the company. I optimized our position. You committed fraud. Emma's voice was rising. While I defended you, while I told my sister she didn't understand business, while I watched you take everything and I said nothing because I trusted you. He reached for her. She stepped back. The movement was small but absolute. He dropped his hand. My mother was still holding the document. She looked at me. Her face had changed entirely. All the confidence gone. All the certainty. How long have you known about this? Marcus found it 11 months ago, and you said nothing. I was building the case. I needed everything documented before I moved. You let us keep trusting him. You were already trusting him. I was gathering proof. She set the document down carefully. What happens now? Now we go to court. The judge reviews the evidence. The business gets audited. Assets get redistributed based on the corrected valuation. And the fraud investigation determines what happens to him. I looked at Emma's husband. Marcus already filed a report with the state attorney's office. They're reviewing it. His face drained of color. You can't do that. We can settle this. I'll make it right. Whatever you think I took, I'll pay it back. It's not about what I think. It's about what the documents prove. I have kids. Emma has kids. You're going to destroy their lives over this. You should have thought about that before you stole $700,000. My mother made a sound, not quite a sob, not quite a gasp. She sat down heavily. My sister's daughter, who was 16 and had been sitting frozen in the corner, stood up and left the room. I heard her footsteps on the stairs. Emma watched her go. Then she looked at me. I'm sorry. Her voice was barely audible. I didn't know. I should have asked. I should have paid attention, but I didn't know. I believed her. I could see it in her face. She'd been comfortable. She'd assumed. She'd trusted, and now everything she'd built her life on was disintegrating in front of her. I know you didn't. What's going to happen to us? I don't know. That depends on what the investigation finds, what the audit reveals, what the judge decides. She nodded slowly. Then she picked up her purse. I need to take my kids home. She walked out. Her husband started to follow. She turned at the doorway. Don't. Stay here. Figure out what you're going to say to your attorney. Because I'm not covering for you anymore. He stopped. He stood in the middle of my dining room, surrounded by documents that proved what he'd done, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked small. My mother's sister touched my mother's shoulder. "Come on, Margaret, let's go." My mother stood up. She looked at me one more time. Her face was a landscape of collapse. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know. I thought I was doing the right thing." "That's what makes it worse." She left. My mother's sister followed. David stood up and started clearing plates like this was just another dinner party winding down. Emma's husband was still standing there. I walked over to him. "You have 2 weeks before the hearing. I suggest you get a good attorney, and I suggest you tell them the truth, because Marcus found everything. Fighting it will just make it worse." He looked at me. "You really hate me, don't you?" "I don't hate you, I just don't respect you. There's a difference." He left. The house was quiet. David brought the dishes to the kitchen. I heard water running. I stood in the dining room looking at the table covered in documents. Evidence of 4 years of work, 4 years of being underestimated, 4 years of building something they never saw coming. My son came downstairs. He was holding his tablet. "Is dinner over?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Did I do something wrong?" Everyone left weird. I knelt down. I looked at him directly. "You didn't do anything wrong. You showed everyone something important. Sometimes important things make people uncomfortable." "Is Grandma mad at me?" "Grandma is dealing with some grown-up stuff. It's not about you." He thought about that. Then he hugged me, quick, fierce, the way 8-year-olds hug when they're not sure what's happening but they know their parent needs it. Then he went back upstairs. David came out of the kitchen. He leaned against the doorframe. "You okay?" "Ask me tomorrow." "Fair enough." He started gathering the documents, organizing them back into the folder. "For what it's worth, I think your dad would have been proud, not of the fighting, but of what you built, of how smart you were, of how you protected yourself." "You think?" "I know." He closed the folder. "The man who built a company from nothing, he would have recognized that in you, he just didn't get the chance." I had one more thing to say. I called Patricia the next morning. She answered on the second ring. "How did it go?" "Exactly as planned." "Good, I'll file the motion to accelerate the hearing. We can request an emergency review given the new evidence of fraud." "Do it." She paused. "You sound different." "I feel different." The hearing happened faster than I expected. 12 days after the dinner, the courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights. My mother sat on one side with her attorney. Emma's husband had his own attorney now. Emma sat between them, looking like she hadn't slept in days. My sister caught my eye once. I didn't look away. Neither did she. The judge was a woman in her early 60s named Catherine Wolfe. She had a reputation for efficiency. She did not tolerate games. Patricia had told me that was good for us. The truth was simple. Games favored the people trying to hide it. Judge Wolfe reviewed the documents for 23 minutes before speaking. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of pages turning. Finally, she looked up. "I've read the forensic analysis. I've reviewed the estate documentation. I've listened to the recording submitted as evidence." She looked at my mother's attorney. "Does your client dispute the authenticity of that recording?" My mother's attorney stood. He was older, expensive, the kind of lawyer who'd been handling family estate disputes since before I was born. "Your Honor, while we acknowledge the recording is authentic, we maintain it was obtained without consent and taken out of context. The context being that your client deliberately instructed her attorney to minimize her daughter's inheritance based on an assumption of incompetence. The context being that Mrs. Harrison was making financial decisions based on what she believed to be her daughter's best interests and capabilities at the time." Judge Wolfe looked at my mother. "Mrs. Harrison, did you or did you not tell your attorney that your daughter would waste any significant inheritance?" My mother stood slowly. Her voice came out smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I believed she wasn't prepared for that kind of responsibility." "Based on what evidence?" "Based on my knowledge of her life, her choices, her priorities." "You mean based on the fact that she chose to be a stay-at-home mother?" "Based on the fact that she showed no interest in business management." Judge Wolfe picked up another document. "According to the evidence presented by Ms. Harrison's attorney, your daughter built and operated a consulting business that generated over $1,400,000 in revenue last year. She manages investment portfolios for 23 clients. She holds professional certifications in financial planning and wealth management. Were you aware of any of this?" "No." "Did you ask?" My mother's attorney interjected. "Your Honor, with respect, whether Mrs. Harrison was aware of her daughter's professional activities doesn't change the validity of the original estate settlement. It absolutely does if the settlement was based on fraudulent valuation and deliberate exclusion." Judge Wolf looked at Emma's husband. Mr. Patterson, I've reviewed the forensic analysis prepared by Marcus Webb. Can you explain the payments to Castellano Consulting? Emma's husband stood. His attorney stood with him. His attorney spoke first. Your Honor, those payments were legitimate business expenses for consulting services rendered. Services rendered by a software engineer who has no experience in commercial real estate and who states he never provided any consulting to the company in question. There may have been administrative errors in how those invoices were documented. Administrative errors totaling $743,000 over a 3-year period. Judge Wolf set down the document. I'm ordering a full audit of the business under court supervision. I'm appointing an independent trustee to oversee all business operations pending the outcome of that audit. And I'm referring the evidence of fraudulent transfers to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. The room seemed to contract. Emma made a small sound. Her husband's face lost all color. My mother was staring at the judge like she'd been slapped. Judge Wolf continued. As for the estate distribution, I'm ordering a complete revaluation of all assets based on fair market value as of the date of death. The estate will be redistributed according to the corrected valuation. Any assets that were transferred or liquidated at below market rates will be traced and recovered. She looked at me. Ms. Harrison, your petition is granted. The original estate settlement is void. Patricia squeezed my hand under the table. I kept my face neutral, professional. But my hands had stopped shaking. I had been holding my breath since we walked in. I let it out slowly. My mother's attorney made one more attempt. Your Honor, we respectfully request time to prepare a response to these findings. You've had 12 days. The evidence is clear. The pattern is documented. This case is straightforward fraud, both in the business management and in the estate distribution. Judge Wolf closed the folder. I'm issuing a preliminary injunction preventing any further asset transfers from the business. Mr. Patterson, you're removed from all operational authority effective immediately. The trustee will assume control within 48 hours. She looked at my mother. Mrs. Harrison, you participated in the deliberate undervaluation of this estate. I'm ordering you to cooperate fully with the revaluation process. Any further obstruction will result in contempt charges. She stood. Everyone stood. She left, the courtroom door closed behind her. My mother turned to look at me. Her face was devastated, crumpled. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her attorney took her arm and guided her toward the exit. Emma's husband was talking rapidly to his attorney. I caught fragments. Appeal, find precedent, this can't stand. His attorney looked grim. Emma walked over to me. She stopped a few feet away. I'm filing for separation. I talked to an attorney yesterday. I'm sorry. Don't be, you were right about all of it. She looked at the folder Patricia was putting back in her briefcase. I should have asked, I should have paid attention. I thought things were the way they looked. Things usually aren't. She nodded, then she left. Her husband tried to follow her. She walked faster. He stopped in the hallway. Patricia and I walked out through a different door. The courthouse steps were concrete and cold. December wind cut through my coat. Patricia was smiling. That was better than I expected. Wolf doesn't usually issue that many orders in a preliminary hearing. What happens now? Now the trustee audits everything. The revaluation takes 4 to 6 weeks. The criminal investigation into Patterson takes longer, but the estate distribution should be settled by late January. She looked at me. You won, completely. I thought about my mother's face in the courtroom, about Emma walking away from her husband, about my son at home with David, doing homework and eating snacks, and having no idea that his college fund had just increased by approximately $1.7 million. It doesn't feel like winning. It will. Give it time. The revaluation came back on January 23rd. The business was worth $5.3 million, not $3.2. My corrected inheritance was approximately $1.9 million. Emma's husband was indicted on 6 counts of fraud and embezzlement on February 4th. He took a plea deal that included full restitution and 3 years supervised probation. He lost his business license. Emma divorced him in April. My mother and I have not spoken since the courthouse. She sent a card on my son's 9th birthday with a check for $1,000. I deposited it. I did not call. Emma and I have coffee sometimes, once a month, maybe every 6 weeks. We talk about our kids. We talk about my business. We do not talk about our mother or her ex-husband or what happened in my dining room that night. My consulting business grew. I brought on 2 junior associates. I moved into an actual office instead of working from home. Last year, my revenue crossed $2.8 million. My son is 10 now. He is funny and kind and occasionally asks why we do not see grandma anymore. I tell him that sometimes families change shape. He accepts that the way children accept most things adults tell them, with trust that it must make sense somewhere. I do not regret what I did. I do not regret the recording or the lawsuit or standing in that dining room and dismantling 15 years of assumptions. But I think about my mother sometimes. I think about the look on her face when Judge Wolf voided the estate settlement. I think about how she believed she was protecting me, how she genuinely could not imagine I was capable, how that failure of imagination cost her a daughter. My son asked me last week if Grandma was coming to his birthday party. I said no. He said okay and went back to building something with his blocks. That was enough. So, did I go too far or not far enough? Tell me in the comments.